Looks like we have about leveled off. So again, thank you all for joining. I know time is as valuable now as it has ever been. So we sincerely appreciate you all taking some valuable time out of your day today. My name is Landon Funsten. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships here at Ekos. I am thrilled to be joined by the great, the one and only Geni Whitehouse. Geni and I met only recently. We actually met at the Unified Wine Conference earlier this year, but it has been nothing short of a pleasure getting to know her over the last 10 months or so. And I'm flattered to be able to call her a friend.
My pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and so I'm going to brag on Geni quickly. For those of you who have not seen her speak before, first, I'm surprised because she is everywhere. Geni divides her time working as a winery consultant at Brooke Markle Davis & Company and also engaging in various writing and speaking engagements. She's also a published author. She's been named a top 100 accounting influencer, a top 25 accounting thought leader, and one of the 25 most powerful women in accounting. So that is a laundry list of awards that I cannot even come close to holding up to. Today, we're going to be talking about headwinds and pain points in the wine industry and how technology can help solve them. So again, my name is Landon Funsten. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships here at Ekos. I have been here just over a year. I actually joined on Halloween of 2019, which made for quite the new hire initiation. My primary role is to build and manage partnerships programs that support our customers and the industry as a whole. So I work very closely with our accounting, finance, and consulting partners, as well as sourcing integrations partnerships and helping grow those over time. And Geni, I know I bragged on you some, but I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
I think you covered it, Brandon. Brandon. I'm going to call you Brandon. Landon, sorry. It's the main point of interest here is that I work with wineries in the Napa Valley. We have about 150 winery clients. Our firm is focused solely on the wine industry. We work with wineries and the related companies. I'm going to go back to my background so I don't look all blurry and weirder than normal. And I'm excited to be here. And the topic at hand is one that I have a lot of interest in. And when we work with wineries, we find that this whole inventory area, the costing integration with other systems is a huge pain point. And so I'm thrilled to know about Ekos, to learn about what you guys are doing. I have a lot of friends in the craft brewery business who are also huge fans. And so we're happy that you can bridge across all the vices and keep us all drinking, Landon.
That's right. Also, that's right. Yeah, that's what we're here for. And we do plenty of that as well, for better or for worse. Yeah, so let's get into it. See if my slides work. Okay. So over the summer and early fall, Ekos surveyed nearly 300 wineries to better understand trends, challenges, strategies, and technologies across the industry. This data was then cut up and analyzed every which way. You can actually find the full report at the link shown here. And Ashley, I don't know if, Ashley, would you mind dropping the link in the chat function for everyone to access? That would be awesome. Now, we're not here today to dive deeply into every single data point that we captured in that study. So instead, let's just take quick stock of the headwinds facing the industry, technology adoption among wineries, and how those two things intersect. So when asked how well they felt they had adopted technology, industry professionals graded themselves at about a B-. As you might expect, smaller wineries graded themselves slightly lower, perhaps due to a perceived lack of resources to be able to afford or invest in technology. Winery owners, which was one of the subset of personas that we got great response from, reported themselves a C+ in tech adoption, which was the lowest among the various roles at a winery that you might see.
So Landon, go back to that slide. I think that those people, those 14% who gave themselves an A grade were grading themselves on a steep curve, because from my experience, the winery technology is it's C level at best, a C grade at best, and there's a lot of challenge in the industry. Now, what that doesn't mean people haven't learned to work around the lousy technology that we have. In my area, Napa Valley, we have some old DOS-based applications that people are still using. We have 25 people on their staff now doing spreadsheets to try to figure out how to get the information that they need to manage the business. there's a lot of room, at least in our area again. And I do a lot of speaking with wineries and technology speaking specifically, and people are frustrated widely with what they're able to do from their systems. And so that's, again, one of the reasons why I'm happy that you guys are taking a crack at this and working on one of the challenges, particularly faced by the smaller wineries, as you said. This inventory piece is something that the bigger wineries can afford to address with some of the higher end systems. But the smaller folks, the people who are using QuickBooks, both desktop and online, are really struggling to get a handle on what their costs are. So this is something that I care about. That's why we bonded so quickly. Landon, when we met, this is a topic that needs to be addressed, and I'm glad it's happening. And with great technology, with new technology, with some of the cloud tools available, and really embracing everything that's currently available in the development space as well, so that you can bring new tools to bear on old problems.
Yeah, that last piece is a great point, Geni. It's not so much that there isn't technology out there. It's just that over the number of decades, the wine industry is very stable, very mature. And there really hasn't been a lot of innovation on the technology side. So it's not that you don't see wineries using Microsoft Excel, which I think to some feels like technology, or some older dated DOS-based or desktop downloadable system. But is that really taking full advantage of what's available in the technology landscape? And Geni, I think that's where you can get to the grading on the curve piece.
And I think it's interesting that the owners said the gave a lower score than some of the other people, and the accountants in particular, my people. I'm a CPA, so I'm talking about myself. We're happy when we have figured out a workaround in Excel that allows us to do something. So we spend way too much time messing around with that stuff and settle for technology that doesn't meet our needs. So we don't think we're suffering, but that also means we aren't looking at the better options that exist in the marketplace. Right. So hopefully we're changing that right now, Landon.
Yep. Yeah, so going back to that technology adoption data, the most significant deviation, it wasn't necessarily the persona or the size of the winery. It came in whether or not the winery itself used inventory management software. So wineries that do not use inventory management software self-graded at about a C. And as you can see here, 31% of those wineries gave themselves either a D or an F, whereas only 3% of the wineries that have inventory management software gave themselves a D, and of course, no Fs. So this was a very interesting predictor of the overall self-perception and self-grading of the level of technology adoption at a winery.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So this is all self-reporting. So there is, some survey bias here, but those that use an inventory management software are 23% more likely to be planning for sales increases over the next year. So that's where you start to see the direct correlation between profitability and growth and the technology adoption and innovation and core business processes like inventory management. So here you can see some of the challenges that industry professionals feel that they are currently facing. This is a long list. There's actually a lot of interplay between some of these factors. And if we could really consolidate this list, what we're looking at is a bunch of different levers that enable profitability, increasing sales, managing costs, gaining better insights for future planning and decision-making. All of that rolls into wanting and, in a COVID environment, needing to increase profitability.
Well, it's always a challenge. It's one of the things that we try to focus on with our winery clients is what are the levers that we can push? And if you don't have visibility and insight into information, it's tough to push the right lever. And so I think you're pushing on sales, but not looking at profitability on the items that you sell. And if you don't know your costs, you don't know your profitability. So it's a huge, huge issue for people. And when people say they have inventory management solutions, often that means that they have a SKU, an inventory item set up in QuickBooks, and they can put the cost in, but that is not an inventory management solution. That is an inventory record that just tells me how many items I have on hand. It doesn't tell me where they are and a bunch of other stuff about those items. And it doesn't accumulate costs for the bulk wine, which is a big piece of the right. Costing challenge, at least in our space, because we're doing multi-year inventory management of bulk wine. And depending on what kind of wine you sell, you have longer or shorter periods of in inventory time to mess with.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So speaking a little bit to the strategies that wineries are implementing to try to overcome some of those challenges listed on the last slide, as well as what Geni mentioned. Again, most of these initiatives roll up into some measure of near-term profitability. It's not until we get all the way down into 0.5 and 6 that we really start to look at that more strategic, forward-looking growth. And here we have listed production capacity, new products. Those are not necessarily levers you look to pull to make money in the next 2 months. It's more of a long-term view. And to Geni's point, for those of you that may be locked into long-term contracts, having that forward-looking insight and data to make better long-term business decisions is going to be really, really critical to your long-term profitability.
So Landon, on this topic, one of the things that we noticed, again, when we're out there talking with wineries, we ask owners to tell us who sits at the management table. And when you're running it, and we found from many of those meetings that the winemaker was often excluded from those meetings because, they're always busy on something that has an impact on quality, which is the big word out here. If you're a winemaker and you use the quality word, you get a blank check to make any investment that you want. Because we never want to impact our quality of our wine. But those people are excluded from the table. And what happens is they tend to be managing the inventory costing and the production stuff separate from everybody else. So there's limited visibility into what they're planning. You also see this launching of new products is one of the areas where many wineries go off the rails from a cash flow perspective because they continue to outgrow their ability to sell. So they produce far more wine than they're able to sell in a period, right, and they end up compromising their cash flow capabilities. So this integration of what that winemaking side of the business is doing with what accounting is needing to see is a critical piece. And again, it's great that you can bring all that stuff together in a much more meaningful and accurate way.
Geni, that is a perfect segue. So let's talk about these challenges in a little bit more detail. Starting with the basics, inventory, and Geni was starting to touch on this. The mess of systems, spreadsheets, notebooks that we see some wineries using is borderline traumatic. We've had some customers come on board that have, and this is, again, is what Geni was alluding to, they use one system or set of notebooks or spreadsheets for purchases. They use another to log production. They use another for DTC sales. They use another for their distributors and wholesalers. They use another for reporting and forecasting. And then what happens? They spend a fortune on bookkeeping and accounting services to make sense of that disaster and then pray to God that the books end up in line at the end of the year. So Geni, inventory's a big bucket here. Where specifically do you see problems in inventory management playing out across the industry?
It's a big bucket, but first I have to tell you, Landon, that I'm distracted by the dirty floor in that cellar. That's bugging me. That's bugging me. That's not up to the OSHA or quality standards that we would expect to see in a cellar room. So
no blank check there.
Yeah, we'll cover that up. I want to go clean it right now. And I have some industry names I recognize on this webinar right now. I saw some names sign in, and I'm sure they're bothered by the same thing. Inventory, there are multiple issues with inventory. First of all, what do I have in my winery area? And that can be between the tasting room, the warehouse, the cellar. How much do I have of bottled or case goods, as we call it in our industry, available to sell? And right now it's a little bit less complicated, at least in Napa, because we have fewer tasting room activities happening and much more of the wine is going out via the e-commerce channels. But we have wine club segregation. And so keeping track of what we've allocated. So once we produce the wine and get it bottled, then we need to allocate that wine to different channels. And most people don't have visibility across those channels, even across their direct to consumer or DTC, as we call it, channels. They can't see where it is. The tasting room doesn't know what's in the warehouse. And then you add to that the external wine that's with the third-party logistics providers, and you're just constantly trying to figure out who's got what and how much do we have and what can we sell. And so the visibility you're providing over that segment of what's in the winery facility or environment is huge. And the way that you present it in the visual way is, I think, really unique. I mean, I can run a report potentially in old systems where I can go to my Excel model and try to count what's there, but I don't have the ability to move things from one location to the other in most of the systems that I've seen.
Yeah. So
if I don't know what I got to sell, it's hard for me to sell it and to deliver on customer service, which is also a big focus.
Yeah. So look, at its core, I don't know that anybody's calling inventory sexy, but we have, you can see from this image here, Ekos does allow you to manage your facility in a real-time facility view, which shows you exactly where all of your inventory is at any given moment, whether it's in your tanks, your vessels, storage locations, tasting room, or even your barrels. This is really, the inventory piece is really where Ekos thrives. We streamline all of your core inventory management processes from purchases through production and ultimately to the sale, so that all of that business data is living in one place. So not only are you eliminating all of those different systems that we talked about earlier, but the burden of reconciling all that information isn't just falling on one person. You may still have a director of operations, but they're not spending 100% of their time chasing down salespeople, chasing down production people, trying to gather different data from all different parts of the business to make sure that the right arm is talking to the left. Ekos offers unlimited users so that your entire team is working together in one place and always in real time. So additionally, and Geni did mention the accounting piece as well, Ekos integrates with QuickBooks and Xero to automatically generate journal entries and seamlessly sync all of your business data into your books. The effect there is the people inside the winery are pulled out of the accounting system, and your books are left to the bookkeeping professionals and your accounting professionals.
We for that, Landon. Keep those people out of our accounting.
So, Geni, what is all this streamlining of inventory management? What does that ultimately do to the bottom line of a winery?
Well, it enables you to grow the bottom line if you know what you have. This is a really weird year for all of us, but especially in the Napa Valley, because we've had, the fire situation. And we have this 2020 vintage that we're managing and just figuring out what we're going to do in terms of future periods and tracking it forward and looking in cost, looking at what we had if we had things impacted by the fires, where do we have the inventory, what was destroyed, what was not. I mean, there's a whole bunch of very unusual complexity that we have to track. But we see a lot of issues with tracking the cost of the bulk wine, keeping track of what we have by type, what kind of fruit we have that's turned into whatever wine, and then moving that bulk wine into different blends and across the winery into different bottled wine. And so we spend a lot of time as a CPA at the end of the year trying to figure out what happened with the bulk wine inventory, where was the movement, what happened. And so the ability to keep that somewhere in an organized system and to track all of that, again, not in a spreadsheet that nobody knows about, is a huge benefit. So the accountants don't want to be in the production space either all the time, but they want to be able to get the information they need quickly and easily so that they can do their jobs on the accounting side. So I think you're keeping both groups happy, connected, but not in each other's way. And I think that's a huge plus.
Yeah, that's great insight. So next up, we're going to talk about cash flows, another area where Geni, being the accounting and finance professional as she is, will thrive. So for small and mid-sized businesses, which again, this is really where we thrive. We are not trying to satisfy the, publicly traded companies out there. We are crafted for the small to mid-sized business. Those businesses, regardless of industry, this is really a problem as old as time. We've heard business owners say that unpredictable and unstable cash flows, it's just part of the deal in owning a winery. Geni, are they wrong?
They're not wrong. It's the biggest challenge. I mean, and the biggest missing piece of this, and the question that we accountants get, and this is across all industries, but especially in the wine industry, is if I made a profit, where's my cash? And most people are trained to focus on the P&L, the income statement, and they look at what they sold and then their direct cost and then the bottom line, and they expect the cash in the bank to be relatively close to that number. Well, in an industry like wine, where you are building up multi-year periods of inventory, both bulk and bottled wine, the cash is not reflected on the P&L, it's reflected on the balance sheet. And that's a financial statement that nobody ever looks at, and even less, if they look at it, understands. And so that inventory asset ends up being the cash consumption. And if you grow that asset unintelligently and aren't monitoring that growth and the value of what you have across all of your locations, you will end up draining the business of cash and eventually going out of business. So inventory is the critical asset in a winery operation that has to be managed and forecasted and planned for, especially if you're doing, and in Napa, many of our wineries have estate grown fruit. So they're doing farming, they're doing the manufacturing, they're doing the cellar storage, they're doing retail and wholesale selling. So they have a complex business to begin with. And if the inventory is not under control, they can't manage their finances. And so it's a big thing. And again, for us accountants, it's a huge problem to come up at the end of the year and try to figure out what happened over the course of the year if good records were not kept on the production side of the business. So
yes, so it sounds like, Geni, that the managing your cash flows, managing your inventory, it may not necessarily be something, if you do a poor job of that for, during Q4 of 2020, it may not sink your business in Q1 of 2021, but it is something that's going to snowball and build on itself that, ultimately becomes a very real threat to the business.
Well, it is. I mean, and there are peak points where cash flow is critical. It's, again, at harvest time, you've got to fund it. If you have crush facilities that you're working with, you've got to fund the crush operations and all that stuff. If you're buying fruit, then you have a big cash drain for the fruit as well. So you have to know what's coming. You have to have full flowing visibility across that organization in order to make sure that the cash is flowing across the organization as well. But a decision made in production can have a huge impact on the cash. And if those folks and their data is not integrated, then you end up with a huge surprise and suddenly there's no cash in the bank and you don't know why. And that's generally why. It's because of something happening in production that is not reflected on the current period financial statements in the P&L. It's happening over in the balance sheet because we're inventorying those current period expenditures in our wine inventory. So we miss out on monitoring those costs.
So let's talk about solutioning here. And as Geni suggested, trying to bring a little bit more stability and predictability to your cash flows. Ultimately, that can be accomplished with better processes and better data. So again, with a core business management platform like Ekos, you gain real-time insight into every single data point related to your purchasing, production, and selling activity. We actually also integrate with Commerce 7, which that integration will be coming live in about 20 days, roughly. And we also integrate with Square. That integration came out a few weeks ago. So that brings your direct-to-consumer data directly into the platform as well. And I'll touch on that more a little bit here on the next slide. So stepping back a little bit. So at Ekos, our mission is to provide craft alcohol makers with a best-in-class business and inventory management platform. There are other systems, of which some of you are probably intimately familiar, that try to do everything. And ultimately, trying to do everything spreads those systems so thin that they very quickly feel clunky, outdated, mediocre, and before long, you really can't manage your business effectively out of them. So instead, Ekos wants to stay focused on what it does best, while providing a connected ecosystem that allows our customers to connect to other best-in-class systems for the other parts of their business. So again, we recently launched an integration with Square. Commerce 7 is upcoming. We're very, very, very excited about partnering with those folks. And we feel that both platforms are truly best-in-class. And the openness of those platforms allow for a great user experience when data is syncing back and forth. So looking at this picture, in this connected ecosystem, we have Ekos. Ekos will be the system of record for your inventory, accounting, sales, and production data. Now, whether you're selling in the tasting room or through your club, Commerce 7 and Square will send transaction and payment data over to Ekos, which will then generate an invoice to automatically deplete your finished goods inventory, account for your cost of goods sold, and then generate the journal entry, which is sent over to your accounting platform, whether that's QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Desktop, or Xero. Because these three systems are connected, ultimately, data is flowing seamlessly from your tasting room or your club, all the way through your business and inventory management system, and ultimately into your books. Geni, you and I have talked a lot about connectivity or lack thereof among the different technologies in the wine industry. Do you see that changing? I mean, we're trying to change that at Ekos, but how do you see that changing over time?
Well, I mean, there's a huge amount of time wasted on getting the data from the point of sale systems into accounting. I mean, there's no question across the industry. And one of the problems that we have is that there's a million different point of sale systems. Yeah. And so the issue that you have as a software provider is which ones do we integrate with? And some of those systems are so clunky that it's difficult to integrate.
Right.
And so the fact that you've got Commerce 7 on board is great, but we need you to add about 9,000 additional ones by next week. Because this is a big issue. I mean, I'm trying to get the point of sale data in. We have people coding manual invoices into QuickBooks daily to try to keep track of what's on hand for inventory. But they're also having to enter the same information in 5 or 6 different systems. So they're entering the new SKU, a new inventory item, in their point of sale system, into their accounting system, into their third-party logistics provider system, into their ship compliant potentially, or whatever else other tools that they're using. And so they're having to add items all over the place, which wastes a lot of time and also adds inaccuracy. But when they make a sale, the transaction data doesn't flow typically until maybe end of the day, end of the week, or sometimes end of the month. We have many clients that only enter their cash receipts in a clearing account all month and then reclassify the components of that into revenue and sales tax collected and all the other things because it's just a laborious process. Mm-hmm. And then the month-end reconciliation of that stuff is a complete nightmare. In many of the systems, many of the point of sale systems, you can't even reconcile the cash to the actual sales figures. You have to go through all sorts of hoops to make that happen. So if you're bringing over that stuff, reconciled totals every day into the accounting system, that's a huge plus, a huge time saver for any winery who's trying to stay on top of their income, their expenses, their sales tax liability, and everything else that's related to that sale transaction. So, I mean, this is a huge plus.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And yeah, so what we've heard from customers thus far is that connecting these 3 systems is saving them about 30 to 40 hours per week in manual data entry and reconciliation.
That's huge.
Yeah. So, just the fact that the data is synced automatically, obviously you're getting the added benefit of keeping that data accurate, having more data at your fingertips, and, all the reporting enhancements and capabilities that come along with that. So, yeah, there's no doubt that the accuracy of the data and the time savings is massive in connecting your technologies.
Without that immediate information over there, it's impossible to course correct until you get to the end of the month. So if we're sitting around all month and not really knowing what our profitability looks like, it's impossible for us to fix it until it's too late. So we try to drive people to do measurements as early as they can in the process. And so by having this integration happen at least almost automatically and immediately, you're in a position to see where the problems are and to correct it before it gets to be a bigger problem. So that's really important, especially in today's world.
Yeah. So we keep mentioning profitability, and this ties back into that initial survey of pain points in your business. And we talk a lot in the industry about driving sales, revenue this, revenue that, but understanding your costs can be every bit as important, if not more, to driving your profitability. Geni, rather than me sucking up all the air on this on this presentation, talking about costing, how do you see this tying back into profitability, and what potential does that unlock for a winery that now has a better grip on its costing data?
I would tell you, if you ask a small business winery owner, this is the biggest mystery that they have. They really don't know. And again, if we're doing the costing, we do it at the end of the year for a client. They don't understand what we did and how we got to those costs in many cases. They don't know during the year what their costs are for certain items until somebody does a calculation. Some of them are doing their own calculations, but they're taking a guess, and then we end up coming in and changing it. Because the way they think about it logically, the way costs are allocated tends to be separate from the way it actually ends up when we go through all the hoops that we accounting folk have to go through. But I mean, they will tell you this is a big mystery. And I have a data point for this. We do a free training to wineries in Napa Valley every month, or we had been. Before COVID, things are kind of different now. And before fires, which is a bigger impact for many of our wineries here in Napa Valley, we did free training classes, and we would have a great turnout. But when we did the costing class, which was explaining to wineries what costing involved, it was always sold out. We always had standing room only. We had to go to a bigger venue because it's such a mystery. and such a complicated aspect of trying to run a winery business. So, I mean, people really struggle with this. So again, to the extent you can automate this process and make it a cross-functional place that people can go to get information, it's gonna improve all of the business operations and all the financial outcomes for that business, and give people more peace of mind than they have today.
Yeah, that's all very well said, and let's expand on that further. And again, for some, you might say, "Oh, costing's pretty simple." Well, it's simple until you put it into practice. But when you manage all of your purchasing and production activities in Ekos, you gain immediate access into the very precise costs that go into every single bottle that you produce. And what's more than that, with Ekos, because you have every team working out of the same system, you're also tracking all of your sales data, giving you profitability by bottle, by vintage, varietal, anything else that might come out, merchandise, anything else that might come out of your facility, revenue by sales channel, profitability by sales channel, profitability by sales rep, and much, much more. So, Geni, absent an automated technology-driven solution, what are wineries really up against in trying to reconcile this manual?
They have a bunch of people with spreadsheets. I mean, you grow your accounting staff in order to make up for the lack of capabilities in your software. And so people buy a relatively inexpensive accounting application and then cobble on other stuff around it, or work around the limitations of that software. I mean, like QuickBooks, for example, they need multiple SKUs in inventory, multiple items set up in QuickBooks to sell to different channels. So you have the wholesale and the retail channel. And because your inventory capabilities are limited, you see people creating multiple items in QuickBooks to keep track of the different sales prices across those different channels. And so the inventory limitations create a whole bunch of additional work on the part of the sales team just to sell the item. And then to keep track of it, you end up having a retail and a wholesale SKU for the same item. And then you have to go through and aggregate those items to see what you really sold for the month. And then you got to go figure out, where did that come from in my facility? What's really on hand? So my QuickBooks system might say I have this many bottles of something available. And then I go wander around the winery and try to figure out where that stuff lives, because I have no ability to really move it from location to location, or to connect the physical inventory to what my accounting software shows that I have. So, I mean, it's a big impact. The profit margin, I mean, once the costing is done, so once the wine is bottled, the margins are pretty much set, but it's this interim period when I have all this cost sitting over in both bulk and bottled wine that gets more complicated. It's what's happening with that bulk wine, and how much money am I incurring period after period to maintain that wine that's in the cellar. Right. And then also getting all those farming costs that I incur every period into that bulk wine costing, so that I make sure I'm accounting for everything that it takes to produce that wine. And it's a highly manual process today in many wineries. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to shift gears here a little bit and talk more about the front of house and direct to consumer. So for those of you that may not be as familiar with Ekos, we also have roughly 1,500 customers across the beer and cider industries, in addition to a growing wine base. Unlike the wine industry, the beer industry, craft beer, had no idea what to do when COVID hit. Clubs, memberships, allocations, even specialty releases, which you think might be more conducive to a brewery with their constant release schedule, they just haven't been happening. And so those activities have just been a small fraction of what you all in the wine industry have really been doing for decades. So the wine industry, without qualification, deserves a lot of credit for having a very, very mature DTC channel as a whole. But there's always a but. There's always a two-faced or a backhanded compliment that comes on the back end of that. Ask yourself, are you taking full advantage of this channel? Are you engaging customers as much as you could be? And this is something that we saw as we were evaluating potential integration partners in the space, is that clunky and dated system that the majority of wineries are using, and you might be as well, is that really allowing you to unlock the full sales potential of your DTC channel? Geni, if you had to identify maybe the single biggest opportunity for the industry to better leverage the direct consumer sales channel, what do you think that might be?
Well, I think it's insight into customer trends that's going to enable them to target where they're having the best success with different offerings that they have. It's improved communication, targeted communication, and I don't know how. I'm not sure how Ekos is fitting into this piece. So you're gonna have to enlighten me a little bit on this. I mean, I'm very focused on the back end inventory stuff that we accountants care about, and that sales stuff, somebody else can mess with that. But they're trying to reach new audiences. They're trying to maintain the connection with their club members who have saved the wine industry during COVID. I mean, because those people are still buying, but at least in Napa, that's held pretty strong, as has the e-commerce sales. But what our folks are doing here is moving from live tasting room experiences to virtual tasting room experiences. And, once you've delivered a great experience, the critical break point between the experience and the sale is the technology that makes it easy to buy. And so if your technology doesn't facilitate a quick buy, then you lose that customer at the point of sale, at the point of buying, at the point of transacting the cash. And so that flow has to happen smoothly from a customer perspective, but then the back end flow has to happen smoothly as well from the accounting and accountability perspective. So,
yes. So Geni, you touched on where does Ekos fit in? Look, I said this before, Ekos is explicitly not a DTC software, but this webinar is intended to help wineries understand the technologies that are out there that can help them run a better business. Ekos is a big part of that. But we do connect into Square, Commerce 7, and you mentioned earlier, and I actually saw a couple questions come through in the chat about potentially integrating into other systems. You will see additional integrations come online in 2021. We are very focused on trying to create an open and connected platform that allows you to connect into as many different systems as you have in your facility. So again, some of you may be using technology already. Is it really the best technology? Again, we feel that our partners here are not only the best in the industry as far as Commerce 7 goes, but in Square's case, they're considered one of the best point of sale systems in the world. And they are, it's a very simple UI, very easy to use. They have a great team of people that manage they have a top-end customer experience. So they do them doing what they do very well allows us to do what we do very well. So the time savings and accuracy of data that comes with syncing your DTC platform with your business management platform are immense. And when you layer the accounting piece on top of that, again, you're saving your business as much as 30 to 40 hours per month of just the most basic data entry and reconciliation, which not only is it time consuming, but for those of you that have done it yourselves, it is psychological torture. So again, it's time savings, it's accuracy of the data, and then it's also the enhanced visibility into your business that this connectivity offers.
One of the things, Landon, that I think that we advise clients today who are looking at software investments is it's more important to have a core technology that is built for evolution than it is to have a full feature set at the day that you purchase it. And so that's one of the benefits.
Geni, I think we might have lost you.
Know what next is going to look like, especially in our world right now, what the new requirement or wrinkle is going to be. And so having a core environment that you build on that is flexible, that is open, that is designed to take advantage of all the cloud add-on app sort of functionality is a big plus. So that's, to me, the first thing you have to look for in a new software investment is what's the rollout plan? How quickly do things get added? And how's the core platform in terms of openness and flexibility so that it will grow as my business and as my market expands? And that's a critical decision. I think we haven't made those decisions wisely in the past. We've gotten solutions that were built for a specific solution or purpose, and they didn't evolve very well. They didn't grow and expand as our business has expanded, as our marketplace has expanded, and as our customer requirements have expanded. And so I think it's a great thing to have a more current technology that we're building on to take us into the future.
Yeah, that's a great point, Geni. And we're going to touch on, strategies and questions to ask when selecting a technology partner. But that's a really interesting one that I guess I hadn't necessarily thought to include on the slides directly, but it is not just gaining an understanding of the platform, but gaining an understanding of the team behind the platform. What resources do they have? How many developers do they have? How many product people do they have? How quickly can they deliver new integrations, new features, new functionality to market? That's a really, really good point, because even if you have two systems sitting side by side, let's say theoretically they're exactly the same today, but if one is being run by a guy in his basement and the other has a team of 60 people behind it, I'm not a betting man, except sometimes, but if I were, I would probably bet on one rolling out new features much more quickly than the other. So that's a really, really good point about buying or thinking about your technology, not just for today, but also to enable your business into the future.
And that's one of the challenges we have with all these winery specific point of sale solutions. They were designed by a guy in his basement to solve one winery's problem. Right. And then they cobble on features as other wineries come on board, and you end up with a cobbled together mess that doesn't meet all the needs. And again, the back end part, which is what I care about, y'all, it doesn't make sense. The accounting concepts were not built in at the front end, so that when you try to cobble stuff on it, it doesn't make sense. I mean, we have things like reconciling cash doesn't work on certain of these point of sale systems. And then imagine what happens with inventory and everything else. And so having an inventory sort of connector in the middle that can pull all that stuff together and organize it is a beautiful thing.
Yep. So last piece here on kind of identifying or highlighting a specific pain point is the business insight. I see Geni nodding. I'm sure she's got some opinions cooked up here. Again, when you bring all of your inventory, production, cash flow, costing, sales data into one place, you're going to be presented with a much clearer picture of what is actually happening inside the doors of your business. Geni.
I don't know what else you can say. You said it beautifully, Landon. I mean, this is a huge issue. You think about COVID, we had to pivot immediately. We had to look at which SKUs we were going to do things with, what kind of specials or promos we were going to put together, how we were going to deal with this complete e-commerce based sales model that was no longer dependent on tasting room visitor stuff. And also how we're going to get new people into our channel, because the tasting room for Napa Valley wineries was the source of new people in our sales pipeline. And so that stopped. And so we had to figure out how to get more people in and what we could do there. But we also needed to know what exactly we had to sell right now. Right. And then every day you want to see what have we got available for that. And you want to be able to fulfill those orders in an efficient and smooth way. And if you don't know what you have and you have to go run around the winery pulling bottles of wine out of different closets and different sites, it's taking away from that customer service experience and also impacting your sales ultimately. So business insights is the focus, not just for the wine industry, but I think for every business in today's environment, because we figured out how to automate the transactions. I mean, we could do stuff in an automated way today, but now what we want to do is make sense of all of that data. And that's what we're struggling with, especially we have these disconnected systems that aren't feeding the data immediately from one place to the other. And that is where I think as an accountant, that is where we can add the most value today. It's helping people make sense of this and pull this data together and then really get an accurate picture of what's happening. Again, as it's happening, not at the end of the month or 6 weeks after the end of the month, which is what we used to do. Yeah. Those were the good old days, Landon. We could wait 6 weeks to figure out what.
and even better. And Geni, I know you're good friends with Chris Farman, who is basically the Geni of the beer industry, who is a good partner to us and has been for a long time. But what he continues to tell his clients is, look, I can give you business insights at the end of 30 days, but what if you were able to get those insights yourself? And then we could get into a room together and actually talk about what to do with those insights. I mean, that's how you really start to iterate and improve as a business.
That's the only way we make a difference is create insights that lead us to actions that improve the business outcomes. That's what we're trying to drive in the wine industry. And waiting till it's after the fact is useless. It's trying to figure out right now what's happening and what can I do to improve it.
Yeah. So we're going to talk very, very quickly about this because we don't need to spend a ton of time on case studies. But Bishop's Orchards Winery in Connecticut has been a great friend, customer, partner to us over the years. They've actually been with us for 2 years. So they were one of our earlier wine adopters. And as I'm sure some of you can appreciate, they have been in business for 150 years. Change doesn't exactly come easily to a 150-year-old business, but they've been a vocal proponent about how Ekos has helped them streamline their processes and has opened up a whole new world of business insights. And you talked earlier about on-prem. A lot of their business is driven by on-prem. And so when they can gain better data into their profitability by sales channel, they can figure out how to reallocate and say, oh, you know what, maybe we do need to supplement our on-premise business with more online sales, more wholesaler sales to get our brand out there and increase awareness in the region. So there's a link to this this case study on our website. Please feel free to go and check it out and see what they had to say. But they've been a great customer and friend to us for a few years now. So Geni, pretend I'm a client of yours. I've hired you to help me with strategic planning, and I'm hoping that you can help me project out my business for the next 5 years. I send you, I'm miserable, I'm your least favorite client. I send you 5 different Excel files and a calendar invite for next week to discuss what you found so that we can go figure it all out. What are your chances of success?
Well, if you have enough money, I can probably get it done, Landon. I'm going to bill you by the hour for that project, and I'm probably going to get rich off that eventually. Because I got some mad Excel skills, but it's not efficient for me to spend all my time doing Excel modeling when I could just push a button and see what's going on in your business. And I don't think you want to pay me for that, for doing all that Excel manipulation. So, I'm going to try to go to whatever data you have at your core system and advise you that you need a better way to figure out for yourself what's happening. Because if you're waiting for me to do it, it's too late. So, and one of the things that we spend a lot of time on is looking for solutions that enable people to do better work. So, I mean, we do it and we'd charge you for it and we could get some insights potentially. But, if I can get it from the core system and have it at my fingertips while you're managing the business, I'm going to come look at your system and see what you have there and be a lot happier. And you're going to save a lot of money. And then I can help you do other things like, improve your team dynamics and figure out which varietals you should be selling more of and figuring out what your margin is per unit, which we're going to know from the system if we have all the data in there. And then I can help you come up with actions and strategies to do something about it, to change the behaviors of your team so that you can achieve the result. But if I don't have the insights to start with, I'm going to spend a lot of time gathering those. And that's not, the best use of my time. I'd rather help you put our heads together and figure out what to do based on the insights we can gain from that data, not be your data analyst.
Yeah, so in sum, less time trying to figure out what the insights are, more time figuring out what to do with the insights.
Exactly. More time acting, less time scrubbing up data just to get things to match.
All right. Well, kind of the last piece of this presentation before getting to some Q&A. If you're evaluating software for your winery, again, whether it's business management, DDC, or otherwise, please do your due diligence to make sure that it's right for you. You want this tech vendor relationship to feel more like a partnership. So don't be afraid to be transparent about your problems, your goals, and your business strategies. If they're the right partner, they will work with you to create a tailored solution and experience that works best for your company, not just today, as Geni mentioned earlier, but also into the future. Second, cost. Cost matters. What features and integrations do you need? What do they cost? Is it going to cost you to add additional team members or your outside consultants, your bookkeepers, your accountants, or do they offer unlimited users? The next 3, by the way, Ekos offers unlimited users. Shameless plug. The next 3 all roll up to the partnership that you should be seeking from your vendor. If they don't know your industry, it's going to be a lot harder for them to solve your day-to-day problems. What happens if you encounter an issue in the software? Is there someone you can call? You need to make sure that your experience with the software partner is both collaborative and constructive for both of
I would add to that. The biggest problem I've seen on software selection is somebody implements a solution that their neighbor recommends, and we got 500 wineries in a 30-mile radius here. So,
right.
We're all neighbors and we're all very collaborative in terms of what we do. So one person implements a solution that solves a specific problem that that winery had, and then they tell their neighbor and they implement the same solution and they have a completely different set of issues that it doesn't address. So the first thing I would say is be clear on what it is you do in your winery and what components of your workflow you're trying to address with your automation. And I don't think people do that well. They just think I'm sick of X. And so they unplug X and put in Y and haven't shopped Y for whatever the specific things they needed were. So it's having a clear definition of what we need and what we need to integrate with and what other tools and methods and processes we want to support with the solution that we implement. And that's critical first, and then start looking for match to whatever the vendor's providing, and then to their teams and and their rollouts and all that other stuff. But if you don't know what it is, what problems you're trying to solve, then you're likely to pick a solution that isn't going to make you any better off.
Yeah, that's incredibly well said. And kind of building onto that, it's not just about communicating your needs to your partner and making sure that you're shopping appropriately, but making sure you actually understand what your needs are. Make sure you've got all of your stakeholders invested, your sales people, your production people, your ops people, and everyone in between. Because
sales, accountants keep the salespeople out. We want to make the decision for our needs, and then we've either left the sales stuff out completely and not met their requirements, or we've not covered production, or we solved the sales problem and then accounting isn't happy, and then production doesn't have what they need. We need to have the whole view across that winery involved in the solution that they pick so that it meets all the needs without crippling somebody else on another side of the business. And I think we rush to do it because it's just an exhausting process. And we have some crisis like COVID has forced people. I've never seen as many migrations off of their accounting software as we're seeing right now. We're helping a bunch of people move to different solutions because COVID exposed all the shortcomings of the tools that we had learned to work around. And so people are moving at a really fast pace because they want to get it done before, January 1st, which means we're running out of time, Landon. We're going to get these solutions.
I'd still look at the calendar and seeing December now still turns me upside.
I know, it's crazy.
So again, here's some questions we would recommend you asking. I know you all don't necessarily need me to read them to you. Geni touched on some things that she would add. Geni, anything else here that we might have missed? I think the planning piece internally and the transparency and honesty with the potential partner is really important. So,
and I would say open APIs, integration capabilities, and API application programming interface for us Guberty tech folk. But how open is it? Because there's all these solutions happening today that are cloud-based that you can add to things, and you want to make sure that the solution you get is open to that, is easily integrated with other solutions, because we all have little components of things that we use in our wineries, like the Sure Harvest and some of those the farming management sort of solutions, harvest support tools. And you want to make sure that there's integratable capabilities, export, import, pasteable fields in your application, things like that we take for granted in some of our solutions that are missing in some of these other ones. So make sure you know what you're getting.
So we are coming up on time. So a quick Q&A. If you all have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A function in your Zoom. We've got a couple coming in already. So I see one that says, what is the one thing the brewing industry does well that the wine industry should follow, and vice versa? That's a good question. Again, we have 6 years of experience in beer. We're newer to wine, but we have learned a tremendous amount over our couple years here. The one thing I would say that the brewing industry does well is they do a great job of adapting quickly. There is still a lot of room for technology adoption and innovation in the brewing industry, but I would say that they tend to be more decisive when they identify a problem and a potential solution. So I would say that would be something the wine industry could take away. The flip side of that, I think the brewing industry is, there's been such massive growth. You know, the number of breweries has grown almost 5x since 2010. That is extraordinary for any industry. And so that's really allowed breweries, I think, to rest on the tailwinds of the industry. You know, it's almost a rising tide where everybody's just enjoying success, and there hasn't been as much focus and attention on actually differentiating the brand. And so that's where I think the beer industry can learn a lot from wine in finding ways to connect more directly and create unique customer experiences with their broader consumer base.
Wasn't the brewing industry more directly impacted by the loss of sort of visitor traffic? I don't think they had e-commerce as well developed as we have.
Yes, exactly. So
harder by the lack of retail visiting options.
Absolutely, and not just retail visiting, but you know, for our customers who vary from, you know, tap room only with some local distribution to larger kind of super regional breweries, not much in the way of you know, the bigger conglomerates, but for a lot of those smaller breweries, 90+% of their revenue was tied up either in the tap room or in the local distributed draft at your bars and restaurants. They didn't have space on grocery shelves, and they didn't have any kind of digital direct consumer channel. Breweries close, bars close. That's all your money. There's nothing else. And so they overnight, their entire revenue stream is gone. And so again, credit to the wine industry for having some diversity in place.
But we hadn't figured it out. I mean, e-commerce was lagging, I think, and one of the things that we've been talking about for a long time, we need to do more of it, and now people figured it out overnight again.
Yeah.
And luckily, many of the point of sale solutions were already cloud based, so they were able to continue to use that for the e-commerce shift. But it's it's an interesting period for all of us, all of us. And good thing we have alcohol to drink to get us through it.
Yeah. So to all of you out there making wine, thank you and keep doing it. I will keep buying. A more kind of narrow question here. How do I get started with Ekos? How long does it take to get started? So visit our website, download or just click out. There's a very, 2-field get pricing form. Our sales team will be in touch with you almost immediately. And we will have you up and running in 4 weeks or less. That 4-week timeline is, it's relatively conservative to make sure that your entire team, not just your ops and your owner, but your production staff, your sales staff, your accounting professionals, consultants, everybody is familiar with the software. So that when it comes time to launch, everybody's fully adopted and fully familiar with the software, so that you can ensure good data going in and coming out as soon as you go live. And thank you to our website is now in the chat function, so you can go find us there. When is the best time to bring on a new technology vendor? Geni, I'll take this one first, and then I'll let you respond. It depends on what you want to do. For something like Ekos, harvest could be tough. That's an around the clock effort. I don't know that I'm recommending implementing a full end-to-end business management software during harvest. Depending on the nature of your holiday sales, if you can make sure that all of your stakeholders are available and capable of being trained and adopting the software, you can do that too. But generally speaking, you want to make sure that everybody that needs to be in the software day to day is able to be in the software day to day. And the reality is that means making time at some point. It never feels like a good time to put an hour meeting on the calendar, but I think in the next couple of months for the wine industry is probably going to be about as good as it gets.
January, February tend to be slower times. People want to implement, right at January 1. I think accountants don't have the bandwidth to do that because there's so much year-end work. So I'd say January, February is a good time to do it. It tends to be slower, at least in our space. We don't have a lot of people wandering around in the cold part of the year. And hopefully it'll be the rainy part of the year this year because we haven't had any rain in Napa Valley. But that tends to be a slower time. There's not as much sales activity, at least from a visitor traffic. But who the heck knows what 2021 is going to be like?
Yeah.
So, it depends on how bad the pain is. What are you suffering with now, and where do you need to, how fast do you need to be improving that? And I think there's a lot of pain right now across the industry in multiple places. And so if you can automate some of that pain away, the time is now.
Yeah. I'm not seeing any more questions, but I am seeing a comment that Excel should be banned. So yeah, Jonathan, we have a motto around here that says "kill the spreadsheet." So we're with you.
Be careful, Landon. We accountants love our spreadsheets now. Don't be killing all of them, just the useless ones.
That's right.
We got to have some pivot tables, or we're not happy. The day has not been as successful if we haven't created at least 5 pivot tables.
That's right.
We go home. Don't take that away from me, Landon.
Well, Geni, it has been fun. We are just over an hour. My, how time flies. Thank you for joining us. To everyone out there, again, I know time is valuable right now. Thank you for taking some time today. Geni, any closing thoughts?
Just keep doing great stuff. Keep adding in those point of sale partners, Landon.
Yep, we'll do it. We will do it. Geni, thank you so much. Everyone out there, thank you so much. Have a great rest of the week.
Take care.